always comes in last minute.
Evening. I call to order the meeting of the SRB on Monday, January the 27th at 7 p.m. Have a roll call, please.
Chair Lindsay,
Present.
Vice Chair Camera,
Present.
sorry, I had to mute real quick. Member Delgavio
Present.
and members.
Present.
Member Taft, present. And Member Middleman is absent.
Thank you. Good evening. Just as a reminder to everyone in the room, we have a sheet for signing in your attendance. We do keep a record on who's attended the meeting, so sometime during the course of the afternoon, evening, if you could sign that, thank you. I'd also like to make just a note that Member Middleman, who's one of the applicants tonight, is in fact a member of this board and but is recused from participating as a board member tonight because he is the applicant. So just note that. Do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are no changes to the agenda. However, you do have a number of desk items for the project at 10 Still Creek. There's a number of letters that have raised concerns about the project, as well as some desk items from the applicant themselves.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we call for anyone in the public who wishes to make a comment or statement on anything not related to tonight's agenda items.
There are no raised hands online.
I see no one in the room standing up. So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I think there's just one item on the consent agenda.
That's correct. The minutes of January 13th.
Okay. And we require a motion to approve those minutes?
Yes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of the meeting
January 16. I'll second.
December 16th.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Vice Chair Camera, Member Delgavio, and Member Taft.
Yes. Great. Well, let's move, that will move on to the first item on the public agenda. This is 10 Still Creek Road. We have a presentation from staff.
Yes, thank you. Let me, oops. Sorry, the wrong thing. There we go. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the project at 10 Still Creek Road. First, I'd like to provide some background information. So the project was presented to the ASRB in December of 2020, and the ASRB provided a review and gave recommendations to the applicant. And after a second hearing, the ASRB was generally comfortable with the conceptual plans and directed the applicant to submit their formal design review and return to the ASRB with story poles installed. So since then, the applicant has made some changes to their plans, which is why the project is being reviewed today. So this is a continuation of the excuse me, conceptual review. So the ASRB shall provide comments and recommendations to the applicant to consider for their formal design review. So the project is located on Still Creek Road, which is a private road. The road bisects the property, but it is actually one property. The lot is in the SCP-5 zoning district, and it's approximately 8 acres. There are some parts of the lot that are in conservation easement. So the project includes a new main residence, and that's this structure here. Sorry, I'm still getting over like some congestion, so my throat's a little froggy. Okay, so a garage and 2 ADUs are attached to the main residence. So that's this structure here, a garage and 1 ADU, as well as this ADU here. So they're attached to the main residence by a bridge. That's this piece here. In addition to the main residence, the garage, and those 2 ADUs, the plans have been revised to include 2 additional ADUs for a total of 4. The 2 additional ADUs would be located here, which is north of this private road. It would be 1 unit on the lower level and 1 on the upper level. And there's also a carport proposed here to serve the ADUs. One of the proposed ADUs that I mentioned will need to be revised to be a J ADU to conform with the new municipal code that allows 3 ADUs and 1 J ADU for the property. So the design of the main residence, as well as all the accessory structures, will all be the same, and they'll use panel siding, and there is materials here at the end of the desk if you'd like to look at them closer. Portions of the structure will be elevated off of the ground with piers, and it's designed to step with the topography of the site. And there are some renderings that were included in the packet or in the plans, but they're kind of hard to see in print. So I just wanted to kind of just click through them quickly so everyone can see. I'll just give you guys a few seconds on each slide. So this is so a view from northwest. So that would be looking at the oh my gosh, I'm all confused. This is main residence. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Thank you, Sage. So yeah. So this is viewing from the road, looking up at the main residence here, and then this is the I think ADU. This is viewing from the north. So you're looking at an ADU. This is that garage ADU, and then the main residence in the background. And then some views from the west and the east, so like the side. And then these are showing the new ADUs that were added across the road. So this is the road here. And so this is that carport structure, and then ADU number 3 and 4. So those kind of 2 views of that ADU structure. This is also the same ADU structure viewing from like the back side of it. So this would be like looking at the back of that ADU structure. So there are a number of entitlements that are being proposed for the development. The first is the main residence will require a maximum residence size exception, as well as a variance to develop within the minimum required setback, a variance to allow the main residence to exceed the 30-foot height, as well as the 2 detached ADUs to exceed 17 feet in height, and a variance to allow development within 35% slope. Each of these entitlements will be considered by the Planning Commission as part of their formal design review. So staff did receive a number of desk items expressing concerns of the project, as well as letters from the project applicant. The desk items state concerns about the proposed development relating to the size, location, community character, the proposed vehicle gate, visibility, screening, safety, to name a few. And then just in terms of where the process, I wanted to touch on that again is, this is a conceptual design review. The applicant will still need to install story poles and submit a formal design review application to be reviewed by staff. The formal design review does include or require more detailed information, more technical information, in order for staff to deem it complete. And after the formal design review application has been deemed complete, the project and story poles have been installed, the project would then be reviewed by the Planning Commission as the final reviewing body. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Sarah? Um,
I just have a quick question of what's new? Is it just the two ADUs across the street from the 2020 ASRB? Or
Yeah,
have some
those are-
other things changed
Those are the two, the two ADUs is new, yes.
across the street?
Yes, that's the revised plan.
Everything else was
Pretty much the same, yeah.
My question was related to that, and because this is a continuation, Sarah or Sage, welcome to answer, but because this is a continuation, are we, what degree we incorporate the feedback from the previous ASRB meeting, and not touch on specific subjects, or can we look at this through fresh eyes, given it's the time that has passed and this is an entirely new board, from that period?
Um, Should primarily be focused on the recommendations from the ASRB from the previous round. Although there are new aspects of this project, obviously those can be touched on, but how those also interact with the overall project together. That can kind of be a way to look at the overall project, and, you know, adding more buildings will interact differently.
That's helpful, thank you. Question about the categorization of the ADUs. In light of your comment that one will need to be recategorized as a junior ADU, I believe code defines that the junior ADU must be attached to the main structure. Does the bridge constitute a sufficient definition for attached?
Yes, so they have an enclosed bridge, so it's kind of like a hallway. And yes, that does constitute being attached. to the
Okay,
main
good.
residence.
Thank you. Couple of questions around off-street parking. So what's the total requirement in terms of off-street parking for this project as defined?
So for the main residence, it's 4 required, and then each ADU that has a bedroom is 1. JADU does not require a bedroom, so 7.
7? Okay. And the project as, the concept as proposed accommodates that?
Yes, their formal plans will have to kind of note where those spaces will be, but it looks like it could accommodate 7.
Yeah, that's it for me.
I just have a, you have that name connected by a bridge. Is there not a driveway that goes up to the main house? I'm just wondering in case of emergency. I know I have some friends over on Kings Mountain where the bridge washed out. You know, they had issues and now they don't have access to the house. So I don't know if that's something the fire department takes a look at to see if emergency vehicles are safely can get to the structure. If something, a tree falls on that bridge or something.
Mhm.
I don't know. What's the rules on that?
Yeah, I think fire would definitely have to look at that, but in terms of your question about the driveway, I can just point that out on the plan. This driveway, so off of Still Creek, there's a driveway here. Can you see? Sorry.
Right,
It's on the screen too. I was trying to show you. You see that?
Uh-huh.
So that's their driveway and then this is the garage. So they can get onto the property to that point. But if your concern or question is about kind of accessing here, they don't have
There's
vehicle access up
no
there.
vehicle access.
Correct.
And it's how many square feet?
The main residence,
Bedrooms?
1 second.
What's the password for the internet?
So it's hard to say what the square footage exactly is, but
How many
it's
bedrooms?
around the total square footage for the main residence and this attached structures is around 10,000 square feet,
So
looks like.
Maybe 4 bedrooms, so you could have sizable
Bedrooms?
number of people in that residence.
Yeah.
But I sent it to you.
And is it usual that you would have as many exceptions as this?
So.
I,
So it's a very constrained site. Although it's a decent sized site, it's primarily constrained by the steep slopes of the property that are just kind of spread throughout the entire site. So to move a building into a setback, to develop on slopes in excess 35%, you might find it a little bit more common on these kind of constrained hillside lots. The height is a little unusual, although the applicant is kind of taking a different approach to the design, trying to put a lighter footprint on the ground to minimize disturbance to the land. So that is something that's a little bit more unique. But, projects on constrained site often will carry some exception requests with that.
Getting to the new structures, the new ADUs, are those requiring any variance or any, and why?
Height is the primary reason. So it's taller than an accessory structure is currently allowed to be.
It's on the hillside?
Yeah, that's something that we've dealt with. We've actually processed a couple of variances for ADUs that are on downsloping lots for similar reasons that backside is usually going to have a taller wall. So it's also something that the Planning Commission will be studying to some degree in upcoming meetings, looking at height requirements for ADUs. And then it also needs the variance to the setback. So it's a required 50-foot front setback. And so it's slightly located in the side and front setback.
And now, is the size of it, because it's 2 ADUs, is one on top of each other? So if you just did one, it would not be as tall and noticeable?
It's possible, yeah. So it's just then it's, accessing it is something, you don't need to drive a car to it necessarily. I mean, when you have a garage or something like that, you need that proximity to the roadway, the height of the roadway, but it's something that would be further dropped down and the applicant would have to just figure out access to that site.
To detail this question, is my understanding, and I visited this site, that it's a pretty steep downslope on the side of the road where the additional ADU, 2-story or 2 ADUs stacked together are. But I believe that it appears to me that the roof, the ridge of the roof will be still not as visible from the road. What can we say about that? And yes, it's higher than the standard height, but as far as visibility from the road, what can we say?
Yeah, I mean, it's all can be talked about related to building design, site planning. But you are correct. Yes, it would not, you wouldn't see 2 stories above the road. The applicant can probably best provide the actual details of how much it would be above the road, but you're correct. It would be, there is a quite steep drop off right from the roadway. So the building would be further down.
So it probably will not be as visible as one can think without visiting the site.
That's correct.
Thank you.
and do we feel comfortable with the fact in light of the LA fires and fires everywhere that there would not be access to the home to be able to drive up to it? and the risk that would play and the neighbors as well?
What we rely on is the fire district and their requirements. Um, this is something that would be routed to the fire district as part of the formal design review application. My limited knowledge is they generally are looking for the distance from the roadway of a building, and so the front of the building is relatively close to the roadway. But it would be something that we'd have to defer to the fire
And
district.
turnaround access, that would be part of fire department.
They would, but typically, again, my limited understanding, and there could be different variations of rules for the fire district. But that's when the building is more than 150 feet away from the roadway. And this is much closer than that.
Yes.
Because otherwise they, again, my limited understanding, they can potentially back out easily if it's not that
Yes.
far of a distance. They don't need to turn around. And in some cases, they may choose not even to go onto the site with their vehicles if the buildings are close enough to the roadway, the fire hydrants.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe to detail the fire department best practices, they really expect to have for residential fire, not for wild fires. They have to have a fire hydrant within 5 feet from the designated roadway. In this case, it's the street, and reachable within 600 feet from the fire truck, where it will be parked next to, within 5 feet from the hydrant to cover the house. So they measure it based on, again, designated roadway. It may be a little bit murky how they will measure it to the back of the, basically to the main residence, but it looks like it will be within 600 feet. There is a Cal Water maintained hydrant, which is good news for the neighborhood.
Could you tell me the setback on the carport? Is that,
It's, it's not called out on here, but I can point to you, this like dash line is the outline of where that carport is. So,
Right there against the right of way, there's these little notches in the right of way, so we'll have to look at that closer. If that's part of the roadway right of way, they may need to either remove the structure itself or relocate it if it is part of the actual roadway easement.
Sorry, just to clarify that. So in the road, where the roadway is drawn with this little section expanded out, is that, you're saying that is not buildable?
I have to look at the easement language closer. I haven't had a chance to review that personally. But if it's something that would not be permitted in a roadway easement, then it would need to be
Got it.
removed. Often driveways are located in those areas. That's
Yep.
not a problem. It's just if you put some type of coverage.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for staff?
That area you just discussed with Sage, can it be a designated turnaround for the fire truck, or it would not be?
I mean, the fire department would look at it if they needed it. These are interesting kind of little notches, so to speak, in the right of way. It's possible they envisioned those to be just for regular vehicle turnout areas. A vehicle could turn out in that area if it needed to, if it was a driveway there.
But it's a town maintained street. It's not a private.
This is
street.
a private road.
It is a private.
Yes.
and just one last question about neighborhood outreach. I haven't made it through all the documentation, but just to confirm, have the neighbors been a part of this decision or process as it's gone along? And did I read something saying that there would be a video that would be given to the town that we would get to see prior to this meeting, and I might have missed that?
You can ask the applicant a little bit more about neighborhood outreach. As we know, it's not required in the code. We always encourage it. Neighbors are notified by the town of meetings. And the applicants and the neighbors present could probably best speak to that.
Just one question. Because it's not a driveway to the main,
Mm-hmm.
say a tree fell. even though it may only be 600 feet to the main road or whatever the fire requirement is, how hard is it to get up there? Like if you were at the, garage and then that something fire, wires, whatever, then how, I mean, is it a big drop? What are we looking at? A feet to ground to the top of the bridge?
There, it's a possible, I'm not well versed in all the details, but there might be, yeah, you can see here on the north elevation in the upper left, that there's still stairway access up to the building. So if the bridge were to be compromised, it's not like you would just have the building floating up there where you couldn't get to it. You'd still be able to walk up to it through those stairways.
You can walk up.
Yeah, I mean, there's
And it probably will be addressed by the fire department in full detail, but probably there is a workaround or additional measure if there will be a pathway, paved pathway from the road to the main residence bypassing that bridge, then probably the fire department can measure it as basically the designated walkway. In case the bridge collapses.
Thanks. If the applicant proposes such a walkway, yes, they can incorporate that into their formal design review plans if it's required by the fire district. That will also be noted by the district during their review of the project.
And can we talk to a little bit about the landscape and hardscape? What are we looking at? Is there,
My understanding is it's very limited landscaping, just trying to keep it kind of the natural native vegetation out there. There's no
around the house?
As a conceptual review, we don't require a landscape plan. It's possible they may propose some. I know there's just a lot of vegetation, a lot of deferred maintenance. I know the owners have been working on getting rid of some of the old dead debris from the site. But I believe the main intention is try to leave it in its natural condition as much as possible.
Just a process clarification. This board has no formal role in the planning commission's decisions on whether to grant the variance, correct?
You're making a recommendation to the planning commission.
We'll try and capture that. Good. Any other questions for Sarah? Nope. All right. We'll close that. We'll move on to presentation by the applicant.
Hi, good evening, board members and town staff and neighbors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about our project. My name is Kristen New, the applicant. I wanted to frame the project proposal in front of you in more personal terms, not just surveys and spreadsheets. My sister Caroline and I grew up adjacent to the property at 95 Skywood Way, where my childhood memories are filled with being immersed in nature. We built forts, played in the mud and creeks, watched in wonder at creatures big and small. My place of peace is Still Creek. It means a great deal to me in a way that is hard to put into words. When David and I became engaged, we discussed what life ahead would look like. We agreed we wanted family to be the core of it, a core value, an integral part of our lives. At the time, his parents lived across the country in Maine. We opened our arms, asking them to join us here in the Redwoods as we created our family. And as we shared our dreams with others, my sister and my mother, They too saw the same vision of building a family home together. Without even living in Skywood Acres on Still Creek Road, I have invested myself in the community and provided service to other residents. I served on the Skywood Acres HOA as a board member for 6 years, and I subsequently am its current CEO. I perform routine maintenance along Still Creek, cleaning out culverts, clearing off the roadway. When catastrophic flooding has blocked the road downhill from the site, threatening its stability, I was out in the flood waters, calling in heavy equipment to save the road. I deeply care about this place and the people who choose to live here. Since I moved away at age 18, it has been my dream and my goal to move back, to live in the Redwoods. It was only in recent years that I felt there was a viable path forward. I began my life at this site, and I hope to live it to its fullest, surrounded by loving family. Thank you for your consideration.
Is that the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, or is there additional?
We'd like to ask our architect, Jim, to speak.
All right, thank you. He's online.
He's on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristen. Am I allowed to share my screen somehow? Is that okay?
Yes, as a panelist, you should be able to share screen.
All right, let me give it a try. All right. What I wanted to do is try to put the design in context a little bit. And picking up on what Kristen said, this property's been in her family for 55 years. And when I first met Kristen, there was a lot of discussion about what this property means to her and her family, and that their dream of living here in a multi-generational setting would be fulfilled someday. And the advantage as an architect to have a client who's been so intimately familiar and viscerally familiar with a site is very unusual, but it's also a great benefit to the designer. So I spent several hours on different occasions with Kristen and David walking the site, looking at areas where one might build, understanding from their perspective, and particularly Kristen's perspective, where the sensitive areas are on roughly 10 acres. And so I want to talk about that. And so what I'm going to do is share just a quick slideshow. You've seen some of this stuff already, but let me go through it. Sort of as an overview of the project or of the site in particular. This should load up here in just a second. So here is a plan of the site. You've seen this already, but I'll give you a little bit more detail. So the site is roughly 10 acres. And of course, it has the road that bisects it, and about midway up the slope. And so in its own right, it's a very challenging site, but it also makes it a very fun site to work with. And of course, anyone who's driven by there knows that it is it is a complete forest, which also adds to the drama and the beauty, but it it also is part of the challenge. Let me go to the next slide to show. This is a cross section of the site looking to the east. So the site has 400 feet of elevation change from the top, which is on the south, down to the bottom, which is on the north. And you'll see in this graphic, you'll kind of see the roadway partway up, sort of bisecting the site. The other challenges are the areas in which we can build. And so, but we looked at these challenges more as opportunities than challenges, I think. And what this map is showing is the areas on which we could really build based on the slopes. And you'll notice the area here where the main house is, you see where the area, where below there, it's with the topography below there where it's not shaded, it's in white. Those are the only areas around this part of the site that are less than 35% slope. And when you go out on the site and you walk it, what you find is that there's this bench up here about 100 feet off the road, give or take. And on that bench is a very nice building site for what we thought would be the main residence. But the issue there is that it's actually a relatively small area, big enough to build, but not quite big enough to build a main residence for what we needed. And so, and because this area backs up to a very steep slope coming from behind, we decided that the best way to allow this building to have the lightest touch on this part of the site was to elevate it up on piers and to sort of minimize the disturbance. But what that allowed us to do was to kind of cantilever the house in multiple directions so we could build out over the 35% slopes, and in some cases, in some small areas, over the 50% slopes, without actually having to touch them. So it allowed us to have a larger footprint while still having very minimal impact on those slopes. You'll notice, if you can, hope that this is big enough for you to see, but in the corner over here of the house, we have one pier that drops down into a 35% slope. We have one over here that drops a little bit into a 35% slope. But most of it, the rest of it, and one perhaps right here, but the rest of it is not. And then in the center of the bridge, we have a pier that drops down into a 35% slope. We were originally going to try to design the bridge as a single span, but I think the realities of construction, getting long structural members up the hill to get to the site would be very difficult. So we decided it would be best to split it in half. Now, having the main residence up on this bench made it necessary for us to bridge across to another area where we could build. And again, the garage is in an area that is not in a steep slope. So when you look at the areas we built in the areas that the site allowed us to by ordinance, staying out of the 35% or 50% slopes. So we did have this area close to the road where our driveway comes in, and we have a garage. And that garage then has an ADU on top. Again, the garage is built on an area that is less than 35% slope. And then the other area we have on the south side of the road is less than 35% slope and far enough away from the road. So we're beyond the 30-foot building setback exception, was for ADU number 2. And again, in this situation, we bridge across the steeper slopes. So the whole idea of the project was to, by utilizing the ordinance's restrictions, is to think of the house in sections that we were allowed to build and then connect them. But what's nice about that is it really is, and I think it's what is desirable there is this idea of these houses that kind of step up the hill or work with the topography to as they articulating going up the hill. And so that's why the house has taken the form that it's currently in. I'll go to another slide here. And you've seen, so again, this is a good example, and I can explain it. The renderings may be a little bigger, but as you see, the main house is up here, and you see that the main house is up on columns. And what that does is it allows, because it's so steep behind there, and as opposed to trying to capture the rainwater on the backside of the house and try to convey it around, we're literally letting the rainwater and the stormwater run under the house and make its way down to the lower ADU, which is much narrower, where we can capture it there and convey it around the lower ADU, which is ADU number 2. And so we have less disruption of the site by having to dig some kind of storm drainage structures. Here in this view, you can see the bridge traversing across through a stand of redwoods from the elevator area that then connects with the bridge and goes over to the main house. This is a view from Still Creek, just looking up at the garage on the left. You can see, and then the ADU above the garage. Here's the elevator tower. That's one of the taller structures. We tried to push it further from the road, so it goes up, and then it connects to the bridge, and the bridge crosses in the steep slopes, and then connects to the main residence. And here is ADU number 2 in front. Here is a view from the west, which shows how the building kind of steps up the hill and through the trees. It should be noticed that the colors of the building, the colors of the window walls, takes its cue from 95 Skywood, which is just up the hill. That house that was at 95 became sort of an inspiration for this one, in terms of some of the window shapes, the colors, the materials, and the idea of these darker materials and this what we call Navajo red or international orange. The color that it was used, it's used in 95. Frank Lloyd Wright used that color quite a bit on windows. They're very good colors in the woods. They recede very nicely, which is what we're attempting to do. We're attempting to have this building weave its way up the hill and through the trees and to blend in. Here is a view from looking west, and you can see ADU numbers 3 and 4 on the right. As you can see, they are their first floor is a little below the road because it is a steep slope, and I think that was discussed before, that the back wall of that is quite tall, but that's because it's very steep on the back side. And this is looking up the hill. Actually, this is an impossible view. If you were actually standing down on the grade from this particular viewpoint, you would be looking up at this built at ADU number 3 and 4 from quite a distance below where we're standing, because we would be way down the hill at this point. And then this is a view from the west, just looking back towards the collection of buildings. And again, I think this is used to demonstrate how they recede and how they step up the hill and how they blend into the site. I also have and this is, and I've rendered this without all the trees. I only have the trees near the house rendered because if I rendered all the trees on the site, this computer model would come to a screeching halt. It wouldn't be able to really move very well. But what I want to do is just give you a quick sort of overview of the site, and to get a feel for the slopes that we're discussing here. And this may be a little herky-jerky, and if people have motion sickness, I apologize. But you can kind of get a view. This is looking from at the site from the east. You can get a feel for that, the amount of slope over from top to bottom at 400 feet. As we zoom in here, this is coming down Still Creek, and then you can see as you're at this point, you can look over it. This is the ADU number. Would be ADU number 3, which is on top, and then ADU number 4 would be on the bottom. But the idea is that that ADU from this position, you can see is pretty much, you're looking at the roof already, because the building is already stepped down below the hill a little bit. And as you come around the horn here, you can kind of see, looking up at the garage, the ADU number 1, which is on top of the garage, ADU number 2 on the right, and then you have the main residence up the hill. I'm going to zoom around this way a little bit so you can get a feel for where that bench is. So this is the bench that we were talking about that was the spot that we realized would be the best place to build a house because of its elevated position. But as you can see from back here, how steep that slope is coming down behind the house. And what we're allowing the stormwater to do is to literally go under the house, and then we can collect it behind ADU number 2 and then convey it left or convey it below the bridge here to the right, which is to the east. Anyway, so this is just a way of showing the way you will really see the building. The building elevations, they're flat, they're impossible elevations. You don't really see a building in that way, but you really see buildings in the 3rd dimension. And this model and those renderings are meant to convey what it is that you will see from various points on the site. So with that, I think that's all I have to say. And if anyone maybe has questions.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have questions of the architect or the applicant?
There are others in our family who wish to speak.
Oh, okay.
Would that
Sorry.
be okay?
Yep, yeah.
Thank you very
certainly.
much.
My apologies.
No worries.
I'm Patty.
Anyway, I haven't met you yet, but I'm Patty New. I know Jim and.
Step up to the microphone.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Hello, my name is Patty New. My daughters are Kristen and Caroline.
Sorry, could you step just a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Patty New. My daughters are Kristen and Caroline. I lived at 95 Skywood Way with Bill New between 1979 and 2005. I now live in Menlo Park's North Fair Oaks neighborhood. Bill grew up on the peninsula near open space areas, which fostered in him an appreciation of and love of these places. His own father designed and built their family home and created a California native plant garden. After completing graduate degree programs, he and his first wife returned to the peninsula to complete his medical residency in anesthesia, which required him to be
within a 20-minute drive to Stanford Hospital's operating rooms. His parents helped them to purchase 105 Sunrise Drive, now owned by Pat and Bruce Bostel. Bill, his first wife, and others bought all the Still Creek Road lots for which they placed the electrical infrastructure underground and later paved the road. Then they bought the 95 Skywood Way lot, and with an architect, in order to have the creative freedom to reflect their own ideas, co-designed and built the original house on that lot. While working as a nurse at Stanford Hospital, I met Bill in the OR and the ICU. We married and I moved up the hill. Through walking our dogs, I got to know my neighbors' dogs before I met my neighbors. As a matter of fact, people knew to check our place first if they were looking for their own dog. I met and befriended a number of neighbors in this way, so I volunteered to write and update a Skywood Acres directory. Myself, having grown up on the outskirts of a New England college town, I had fields, woods, a pond, and stream to roam and play in. These places formed part of who I am and why I yearn to be part of Wild Places again. I learned about and grew to love the flora and fauna of this beautiful and tranquil space. I look forward to returning and living together there as part of a multi-generational family group and sharing this experience, especially with my extended family, especially with my 4 grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Middleman. Let me show you. Thank you. Okay, and I'm honored to be here to speak with you today about something that's very important to me, a multi-generational home that reflects our values and vision for the future. I was born and raised here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where my family's journey began after World War II. My father went to Stanford University during World War II, and then after Korea brought his family, his parents and his sister's family out here to settle. And he was instrumental in building a good amount of Silicon Valley, and was also part of the big founding members of Congregation Beth Am in the area. So this legacy instilled in me a feeling of legacy and importance of being the potential of what can be done living here. So when I left to pursue my education and medical career on the East Coast, I realized what I missed, the value of having multiple generations living in close proximity. The support, wisdom, and love that I enjoyed growing up here created a nurturing environment that fostered my growth and resilience. Years later, when David and Kristen shared the exciting news of their engagement, David asked Nanette, my wife, and me if we would join them in their vision of creating a multi-generational home. We were overjoyed to accept this invitation. My wife just literally, we sold the house within weeks. And it felt like a full circle moment, a chance to continue our legacy, family legacy of togetherness and support. Making that decision in midwinter in Maine was not a very difficult thing. So now, as we live in our multi-generational home on Grandview Drive here in Woodside, my wife and I experience daily joy in helping to raise our grandchildren, Eugene and Hannah, and now also being part of their cousin's life as well. Their laughter and energy fill our home, and being part of their lives enriches us in ways we never imagined. The benefits of multi-generational living are profound. It strengthens family bonds, allows for the sharing of resources and responsibilities, and creates a robust support system for both childcare and elder care. Moreover, it fosters a sense of community and continuity that enriches our lives. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt enthusiasm for this project. I believe that our multi-generational home will not only enhance our family's well-being, but also contribute positively to the broader community, as I currently serve as chair of Woodside's Emergency Preparedness Committee and also co-chair of WPV Ready, continuing my volunteer work here as I did in the fire service in Ohio, Connecticut, and Maine when I lived there. Thank you for considering our vision, and I look forward to your support for bringing this dream to life.
Thank you. Thank you for your volunteer service to the town.
Hi, good evening. I'm Caroline New, and I'd like to share a few thoughts about this project at 10 Still Creek as well. As you've heard, this parcel has been in our family for more than half of a century. The property is located, as Kristen said, next to the home where we grew up at 95 Skywood, and our family's story is truly intertwined with the woods. A deep respect for the beauty and the character of Woodside and a sense of responsibility as stewards of this land are values that Kristen and I share, that we learned from our parents and from living here, appreciating our surroundings. For us, the land is more than just a place. It's where we spent our childhoods forming lifelong memories in the forest. It was our backyard, our playground, and our sanctuary. We spent countless hours playing by the creeks, walking the road, hiking the trails, building forts, and learning about the native plants and animals. We even went trick-or-treating along the street, despite how spread out the houses were, and we'll always remember the warm and generous goodie bags that Mr. and Mrs. Bostel made us, thank you, each year, every Halloween. So after leaving Woodside in 2001 to attend college in Philadelphia, I spent more than 2 decades on the East Coast. Last summer, I returned to Woodside, bringing my own young family with me, my husband of 8 years and our 2 young children, Amelia, age 5, and Jack, age 2. We made this move with the intention of raising our kids here, surrounded by the love and support of extended family. We also timed our moves so that our older kid could start Ormondale for kindergarten this past fall. Our decision to come back to Woodside was driven by our desire to create this multi-generational household on Still Creek, so our children can grow up alongside their cousins and grandparents, also experiencing the unique beauty and values of this place. I greatly appreciate Jim's design, which not only blends seamlessly with the natural environment, but honors the history of the site and of neighboring houses. The color palette and choice of materials, with an emphasis on sustainability, energy efficiency, and fire safety, demonstrate a genuine respect for the character of Woodside while also being mindful of its future. One of my father's Stanford classmates, the late Sid Hoover, was the architect for both the original house at 95 Skywood as well as for 35 Still Creek. And there are elements of those designs repeated in Jim's design for 10 Still Creek, including the walls of windows framed in a red paint that's reminiscent of international orange used for the Golden Gate Bridge, a reddish orange that echoes the color of the redwood bark. As my mom alluded to, my dad's childhood home in Hillsborough was also located in the woods way before Highway 280 was built. He loved the setting of Still Creek and instilled in us the sense of responsibility of being good stewards of the property as well. The woods are my happy place. As Kristen said, it brings peace. If you've ever done a guided meditation in which you're invited to visualize a place where you feel calm and centered, Still Creek is the place that I see in my mind's eye. The forested landscape, the way the light filters through the trees, and the sense of peace that comes with being surrounded by nature. It truly feels like home to me. When our father died in 2017, he entrusted Kristen and me with the care of this land. And I know that the design and the vision of this project would certainly make him proud. What would bring him even more joy is knowing that his 4 grandchildren, whom he never had the chance to meet, will have the opportunity to grow and thrive here, learning from and enjoying the land just as he and his children did before them. Thank you for allowing me to share these thoughts and for taking the time to review this project, which means so much to our family.
Just this. That's it, okay. You can? Hi. I didn't want to break it. Ah. Thank you. Thanks, Sage.
Considering the discourse that has emerged around our forever home, I should address the concerns raised in the letter from our neighbors dated January 24th. Considering the discourse that has emerged about our forever home, I should address the concerns raised in the letter from our neighbors dated January 24th. We postponed this review to address a lack of recent communication around the project. Admittedly, we failed to reach out before the December 16th meeting proactively. We realized our mistake and asked for a postponement, not just to the next meeting on January 13th, but to today, to allow 6 full weeks for the neighbors to reach out with questions and concerns, as well as to take us up on the ample opportunity to walk the site to understand the thought and care that went into this design and how we prioritize reducing the visual impact in all cases. One neighbor took the offer to walk the site during that time. Most neighbors took advantage of one session with us, and you have the minutes as desk items. In the packet before you are records of 2 previously noticed public meetings regarding this project, December 14th, 2020 and June 21st, 2021. The town informed the neighbors about these meetings per our town's policy.
Voda.
The town informed the neighbors about these meetings per our town policy, and we initiated outreach to our neighbors during that time. Except for the new owners of 95 Skyward Way, everyone currently residing on Still Creek Road was a resident during that period. The only significant change between the project presented then and the one proposed now is the inclusion of the detached ADUs on the north side of the lot. There are no new variances associated with this project. The footprint of the larger structure remains essentially unchanged. Secondly, our project was described as not being consistent with the evaluation criteria the ARB weighs projects against: community character, site planning, building design, and landscape elements. I would like to offer why we think it is consistent. From the outset, our project took the criteria to heart. It incorporates design elements from 95 Skyward and 35 Still Creek, which has been mentioned multiple times, featuring sash factory windows and a dark brown exterior to honor the rural character and community aesthetics. The project aims to preserve the site's natural features by elevating the main residence and minimizing grading wherever possible. Most neighboring homes lack upper floor setbacks, resulting in a flat facade. The ADU structures reflect this flat facade, while the studio ADU and main residence include upper floor setbacks. Our site is not in a scenic corridor, nor does it disturb the view of any existing vistas. We have made extensive efforts to minimize grading on the site. Our original plan did not include retaining walls for slopes greater than 35%. The terraced retaining wall next to the garage was a response to a previous recommendation from the ARB to decrease the size and bulk of the one visible retaining wall. We don't hold a strong opinion either way, but we will note that the current design necessitates grading on a 35% slope, and the town engineer questioned this decision in the following call. While we will not be utilizing the zoning allowance for a 3,000 square foot barn and equestrian facilities, our parcel includes part of the town's equestrian trail system, enabling equestrians to access Wonderlic Park directly from the south side as an alternate to the main entrance of off Woodside Road. There are many site constraints, and the project was cited on the flattest sections of the parcel regarding site planning. There are many site constraints, and the project was cited on the flattest sections of the parcel. To reduce grading and respect the property's natural features, the site is not visible from any of the neighbors' properties. These were taken out of the Woodside design guidelines as guidance. The nearly 10-acre parcel will be kept mostly in its natural state. The site is also on the opposite side of the parcel from the dedicated conservation easement, which the town maintains with the express purpose of preserving open space and reducing our disturbance of the natural conditions as much as possible. The project siting was selected to weave between the trees to avoid removing trees to build a house. We want to live in a home along the trees and not removed from them. The siting allows us to situate our parking and building behind a redwood grove to screen it from view, utilizing the site's existing features. The detached ADU site was chosen carefully to ensure no slope from the parking pad to the upper ADU. This was done to maintain ADA accessibility, as this unit and the units above the garage are designed for the graceful aging in place of our family members. Patty is going to live in that upper ADU of the detached unit. Even though the town does not have an ADA requirement in its housing element or code, this represents a self-imposed requirement to build a project that allows our family to live in this property for generations and not age out of our occupancy. The town's median age increased by 4.6 years between 2000 and 2019. The town is aging and needs housing that accommodates an aging population. In siding the buildings, we place the larger windows facing north and south with smaller windows facing the adjoining property lines. South of us is a hill with the closest neighbor being 721 feet away and 211 feet above the project. To the north, there is no adjoining property. To the east is 95 Skywood. With the setbacks, still 846 feet away and 132 feet above the project through woods. And to the west is 45 Still Creek, 1,300 feet away and 125 feet above the property. The structure was also sited with fire safety in mind. You've asked a lot of questions about that. The main residence is 40 feet from the garage in ADU number 2. The garage is also 17 feet from the ADU number 2. Finally, the detached ADU building utilizes the largest dimension of our property and is set back over 100 feet from the closest structure. While the fire code does not explicitly address spacing requirements between buildings on the same property, the garage and ADU number 2 spacing is more than 200% the theoretical minimum existing ADU law requires between 2 different parcels. The site has been designed to minimize energy consumption. We will strive to meet as many passive home requirements as possible, striving for a net zero project. Unfortunately, solar is impossible without cutting down the trees that make it infeasible, so we cannot achieve a passive home certification. But we are looking into a gray water recycling system, working to reduce the design flow of the building by 1/3, while reducing the septic load of the project by 2/3. We will utilize a home energy management system to minimize our peak demand on the power grid, and we will use redwood milled from the site on the interior finishes to reduce the building's carbon footprint. With regard to building design, our material choices are meant to be subdued, and the building form with its flat roofs is designed to minimize the visual impact of the structures as much as possible. Despite being multiple structures, the same design language is applied throughout the design to form a cohesive project. Metal siding and standing seam roofs will make up the exterior finish with the Turkish coffee and red orange windows. We have selected materials primarily for their fire safety, choosing steel construction over wood and utilizing metal cladding with the self-imposed requirement of a 2-hour fire rating. The roof will be a Class A roof, and we are also investigating fire sprinkler systems. Our material selections and simple building design were chosen to simplify construction and reduce cutoff waste. We chose to utilize a lifted design for one of the structures because we wanted to reduce grading as much as possible. You asked about landscapes. The hardscape plan is minimal, and permeable hardscape will be utilized where possible. We have the required number of parking spots per the town code, and additionally, 2 other additional spots on the side of the road offer parking without blocking access. Per the town code, we are actually only required to have 4 parking spots because we're half a mile away from a public transit corridor, but we meet that requirement by a factor of 2. We designed the building to work around the redwoods to preserve as many as possible as the forest surrounds the project. We intend to plant little or no trees outside the footprint of the structures. If we move forward with the terrace retaining wall, we will reduce the visual impact by planting the terrace, and we are also investigating a green roof for the project and will plant it accordingly to also minimize the visual impact of the building. We do have a fenced dog run but it will be positioned uphill behind ADU number 2 and below the main residence to reduce visibility from the road. The design will remain visually open and will be at a height that permits wildlife to pass freely. We have no current plans to install fencing along the road or around the property's perimeter. Except for the detached ADU structure, all entrances are simple doors facing away from the road. The entrance to the main residence is actually set in from the exterior of the garage along an internal walkway. The lighting plan we will present to formal design will focus on minimizing visible off-site light, even though it is not visible from any neighbor's homes. While we do not have a lighting plan for you today, we plan to use dimmable dynamic lighting where possible, opting for warmer light as evening approaches to lessen the visual impact of lighting during this time. And by grouping the buildings close together, we can maintain a single defensible space around all the structures. We will be using pebble stone 5 feet around the buildings and below the main residence, and we will work to extend out to 100 feet a lean, clean, and green zone void of combustible material. Recently, after receiving our arborist report detailing 40 trees to be removed, we conducted vegetation management to reduce our neighbors' exposure to fire load. We removed dead or dying trees, diseased trees dying from sudden oak death, and trees impacted or shaded by more mature trees. We did this separately from the planning process because we felt it was our neighborly obligation to do so, regardless of whether we ever built on the property. In addition to these 4 criteria, the ASRB is tasked with ensuring that a project is consistent with the general plan. To quote the most recently adopted housing element from the general plan, one of the major methods of creating affordable housing in Woodside is through development of ADUs. Resident survey information concerning ADUs demonstrates strong support for this approach. ADUs and JADUs will continue to be a significant source of affordable housing in Woodside. The Woodside community overwhelmingly supports the development of ADUs and JADUs as a primary means of addressing the state's affordable housing mandate, given the town's rural character, equestrian heritage, and its many environmental constraints. With each ordinance adopted by the town that reduces barriers to JADU and ADU construction, the town has seen increased interest, application submittals, and permitting of such units. And it will be one of the only ways we avoid multi-family housing zoning in the next housing cycle. Still Creek Road is not a 1-lane road, despite having a width of 22 feet in some areas. It meets the standards for a 2-lane road according to California code, which defines a minimum width of 20 feet as a requirement. We also propose adding bollards to prevent unauthorized use of Still Creek Road by uninvited entities. As the property that owns the road, we are concerned about the burden of acting as de facto security guards for property beyond our own. During our conversations with neighbors, they committed to working to realize one of the other options to address the road, including a road maintenance agreement or a public dedication. Therefore, we will be removing the bollards from the plans for the formal design review. We understand that our neighbors have concerns about the variances we are applying for, which they have communicated to the ASRB. We want to ensure that everyone feels heard and respected, and that the nature of these requests is precise. Therefore, I would like to outline what we are actually asking for. The Planning Commission shall make the following findings when granting variances. That because of special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, and surroundings, that the strict application of the zoning chapter will deprive the applicant of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity and under the identical district classification. That the variance does not constitute a grant of special privilege, is consistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and under the identical district classification, and is consistent with the objectives of the zoning chapter. And that the strict application of this chapter would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary physical hardship which is not of the applicant's own making. And the granting of the variant will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property in the vicinity, and that the granting of the variance will be consistent with the general purposes and objectives of this chapter and the general plan. Excuse me, and thank you for listening. While none of the homes fronting Still Creek Road needed a maximum residence size exception, many are comparable in size to our proposed main residence. Some were subject to CCNRs at the time of construction, which 45 Still Creek did not adhere to, exceeding their permissible size by 30% despite objections from their neighbors. These same restrictions were deemed invalid as a condition of purchase by the current owner of 45 Still Creek. 95 Skyward Way, while not requiring an exception, was approved for 5,400 square feet, or 90% of the current maximum size in the code. The total floor area calculation is referred to as a footprint and is out of character with the rest of the properties on the road. Total floor area is a weighted calculation to discourage tall structures in the town of Woodside. The actual footprint of the building is less than half the total floor area, as they are all 2 or 3 story structures. When you discount the project areas designated as ADUs, the residence is comparable to the neighboring homes and 5% below the maximum residence size, without exception. About 5,600 square feet. The exception is necessary to accommodate the attached ADUs, which were allowed under historic and current ADU allowances. It should also be noted that every property on Still Creek Road is greater than 1 acre, and every one of our neighbors enjoys the same entitlement to construct 4 ADUs on their property. This project brings the density of our parcel to 1 unit every 2 acres, compared to 2.5 units every acre on 105 Sunrise, and up to 5 units an acre on neighboring Skyward Acres properties greater than or equal to 1 acre. They should also choose to exercise their entitlement. The exception has been granted liberally since it was created in 2017. Our property cannot be subdivided to be a lot smaller than the minimum acreage required for the exception, and our residence size is below the 8,800 square foot limit with exception. In any case, we are utilizing only 50% of our total floor area allowance, and our main residence total floor area is 10% below the maximum allowed with exception. When 95 Skyward built its addition in 1990, the design required a variance on slopes as the south side of the proposed new structures will be graded into a 70% slope. A 70% slope, requiring a 6 to 12 foot high with engineered retaining wall. This wall was so critical that the town required multiple geotechnical surveys, a geologist on site daily during its construction, and daily compaction reports to the town. The exception to encroach on a 35% slopes allows 3 piers to support the corners of the primary residence and the pedestrian bridge. No grading of slopes exceeding 35% and no retaining walls are required on a 35% slope to construct our primary residence. This was avoided by elevating the primary residence off the ground using piers. The aforementioned terrace retaining wall goes into a 35% slope. As stated earlier, we're happy to forego that. This request does not represent a special privilege. As Sage said, many residents of the Western Hills, including the neighboring property, benefit from this exception. We are navigating the numerous constraints of the land while aiming to respect it in the process. This request would not harm public welfare or negatively impact other properties, and it aligns with the general plan, allowing us to accommodate the permissible number of units on our property. By elevating the primary residence, we safeguarded the site. We aim to maintain the area's natural features as much as possible, in line with the residential design guidelines. However, this resulted in a roof height of 3.5 feet above the height limit at one corner of the primary residence, where the slope declines. The remainder of the roof is under that limit. The house, if you took the piers away, is only 23 feet. The average height for that roof section with the 33.5-foot plate height is still below the 30-foot height limit. The exception allows for an extra 5 inches, of which 68% is used. The findings can be made for the height exception. This minor exception to height will not obstruct the view from roads or neighboring properties, and the lot is more than 150% of the minimum 5-acre lot size for the exception. 95 Skyward Way enjoys this variance, with its structures exceeding 30 feet in some areas. 2 structures on the property have 3 floors on their north face and a hip slate roof. Finally, we are requesting a setback exception. There are no alternatives available at 10 Still Creek for placing a house that would comply with zoning regulations. Allowing this exception will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts on our property, neighboring properties, or the surrounding community and town. This exception will not significantly impact our privacy or of that of our adjacent neighbors. Additionally, the exception aligns with the spirit and intent of the goals and objectives outlined in the town's general plan. It is heavily wooded land between our property and the neighbors. The exception places the house closer to 95 Skyward Way, which is still 846 feet away with an elevation difference of 150 feet. Furthermore, most of their windows face away from our property. This also allows us to position the house in our front setback defined by the road that divides the building site. Our requested exception sets our front and side setbacks at approximately 34 feet and 32 feet, respectively. There are 3 homes visible from Still Creek Road, not 1. 35 Still Creek is visible and meets the 50-foot setback with a setback exception of 45 feet for its garage. 105 Sunrise, whose main residence enjoys a 32-foot setback and a detached garage with a setback of 29 feet that fronts Still Creek, is also visible at the entrance to Still Creek Road. And 95 Skywood also has a setback of 45 feet. The variance process exists to address exceptional circumstances. It applies to individual properties that are unique and not addressable by code in an equitable fashion. Some of our neighbors enjoy the variances we are requesting. Our proposal aligns with the general plan, the Woodside Design Guidelines, and the municipal code. Our variances are minor in nature within the context of our neighborhood. We continue to work to ensure the project maintains harmony with our neighborhood's character while ensuring our neighbors' continued safety, security, and privacy. We are happy to discuss the main residence, the building design, landscaping, and any other items related to the project concept that can help refine our vision. As Kristen stated earlier, this property has been in the family for 55 years, and we intend to live on it for another 55 years and beyond. Your consideration of our conceptual design is welcome to help ensure every aspect of how we live on our property is considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone on the board have questions of the applicant? We have one member of the board who may have to dismiss themselves. Already? You're going to stay? All right, good. I was going to let you go first. Anyone have questions of the applicant?
It's one about the reflection on the windows. I'm sure you've looked at so many. Oops, sorry. I'm sure since you've been so thorough that you've looked at all of this. What are you doing about the reflectancy of all the windows? There seems to be so many on the face as I see it.
Low emission glass.
Low emission, but
Low emission glass, potentially 2 double or triple glazed, depending on how far we go. Our lighting design will make sure that there are no lights pointed out, and the entire site pretty much gets indirect sunlight. So reflections from sunlight might be a 20-minute event in the middle of the day.
So emissions basically is about temperature, not necessarily about reflective. There are reflective products that are available. Is that something you might have considered anywhere along the line?
Yes, sorry, I misunderstood the question, Pat. Um, our goal is to get to a passive house. So with regards to getting, the walls are gonna essentially be up to R50. We're designing for a climate zone that's above ours to ensure that. And with that, our U factor will be commensurate.
Other questions?
It was very information intensive. I just wonder if there is a kind of summary. Here is an objection from the neighbors, and here is the response. Is there, maybe I missed something in writing? If there is, I would like to get a copy too.
The objections were, sorry,
We'll get to the public comments.
Okay.
Which I think probably more appropriate to address that at that time.
I agree.
The specific questions of regarding the conceptual review itself.
Then one more clarification. There was something about removable bollards.
Yes.
So
We are
they were
remo-
removed and they came back and so on. It's kind of an interesting, and it's a pain point for me. I live on a private street, and with new neighbors, there is constant traffic and there are some strangers. So again, I just wonder, what was the argument against bollards? It's inconvenience for whom?
My God, you're tall. So the bollards had been I guess, it was our approach to lessening the liability of trespassers. I believe David described several incidents in a letter. Certainly, we've all been concerned with fire. Among those incidents was somebody who hauled an RV down there, parked it, set up a campfire, and had half a dozen full gas cans next to that RV, probably thinking it was the middle of the
State wind.
forest. So, but there have been dozens of incidents over the years. And so that was sort of an attempt to mitigate that liability. However, we have definitely heard the feedback of the neighbors, as we said, and we will try more creative approaches to lessening liability and protecting our individual properties.
Thank you. Again,
Yes.
I'm biased actually. I'm for some kind of a protection and markers because I suffer because we do not have enough. We have bollards and it says private, yet people come and litter and.
It's a suggestion, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Sarah, could you summarize briefly what the specific variances are that are being requested, part of this concept?
Is that on? Okay. So the specific variances are, well, the first is it's a maximum resident size exception. It's just a formula based on the lot size. Then there's the variance to setbacks.
And
So that,
sorry, that maximum residence includes the ADUs as part of that calculation, or?
it includes the ADU if it's attached, yes, but there, you can exclude a portion of the ADU, up to 800 square feet. Yeah. Then there's a variance to setbacks, and so both kind of that garage ADU and ADU number 2, as well as the 2 ADUs across the street, encroach into the minimum setback. So it's a variance for those structures.
And are those all addressed independently by the planning commission when they evaluate these?
It's,
Or is it one simply one exception.
It's like treated as one variance to setbacks and,
Even though it's multiple structures.
right,
Yes, so it's one variance, so if the findings can't be made for all of them, the planning commission could say, you know, change the project here or there. But when it's for one specific part of the code, it's just treated as one variance, but it needs to address all the structures in those findings.
Got it. Thank you.
and then there's the variance for height. So there's a portion of the main residence as well as the ADUs that exceed the maximum height. And then the last one is the variance to develop within steep slopes, so 35% or greater.
Right, thank you. So from, I think our benefit, the board, I mean, the understanding that single variance has to incorporate all structures is new information for us, so it's helpful. Thank you. Okay.
Variance. And go back. to the drawing board or-
So there could be a scenario in which they feel that the findings can be made for one of the structures, but maybe not another. So therefore, they would require that the project gets redesigned. But if they can't make the variance findings, the project's not redesigned, it could be a reason for denial of the variance. Without, you can't approve one component of the structure without the other.
At that time, but not equally treated. That makes sense?
Yes, there could be a situation in which it's that findings are determined that they cannot be made for one of the structures.
And the same applies for setback.
Correct.
Just to clarify, it's setbacks for the ADUs, the minimum setback is as little as 4 feet. So what is the variance?
So ADUs are still required to meet the front setback unless there's no other location that they can fit. And then right now, the way the code is worded is that only one ADU up to 800 square feet or 800 square feet of an ADU can go into the side or rear. So when you have multiple or larger, then they would need the exception.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's larger than 800. I don't know the exact.
I can answer that question directly. The ADUs in that building are less than 800 square feet, about 707 square feet each. There's a little bit of interior space that's common area to get from the upstairs to the downstairs in the mechanical room. But the ADUs themselves are below 800 square feet.
Okay. Sorry, I apologize. I redirected that, mostly questions of staff. Just wanted to get clarification on some of the variances expected. But
I can stand here too.
any other questions of the applicant? Nope. Nope. Okay. With that, we'll move on to public comments and questions. So at this stage, I invite the public either in the room or online. If you're online, raise your hand and we will rotate between in the room and online. But I invite members to step to the microphone if they wish to make a comment.
Would like to step up?
No? Sure.
Hello, my name's Aaron Amy. My wife Jendi and I are the owners of 45 Still Creek Road. And I don't want to be here this evening, no offense. But I would far rather be here to say, great, welcome to the neighborhood, welcome back to the neighborhood, and support the housing. But instead, what you'll see is that every single one of the owners of the homes on Still Creek Road and every single one the adjoining property, of the owners of the adjoining properties have individually sent in letters in opposition to this project. And I think all of us are here either in the room or online as well. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. And the first is, Ms. Delgado, you asked about the community outreach, and there was none. We received a letter from the town 2 days before the time the meeting was originally scheduled, as did our neighbors. And one of our neighbors fortunately had time to look into it and go, whoa, this has been really expanded. And I think the project is expanded on the main side as well, but certainly you view it in its totality. It's quite a large departure and a huge departure from the character of all the homes on Still Creek Road. You know, we reached out as collectively and said, hey, could we have some time to, you know, learn what this is and to talk with you about it. And then, you know, we had a meeting with the applicants and gained an understanding of what was proposed overall. But we were told at that time that they would not entertain any changes whatsoever based on our input. So we're left, you know, rather than being able to come here in support of a project for people to move in the neighborhood, you know, having to be in opposition to it because it's pretty extreme. And the nature of the communication, both with us and I think with the board, has also been, you know, highly problematic. And the issue of the bollards was just discussed, for example. So this came up 4 years ago when the plan was first promulgated. We've been residents for 10 years, and you know, at the time, we meaning certainly both of the houses that are downstream of where the road obstruction would be placed opposed those, and we were told by the applicants, okay, we'll remove them. We were not going to, you know, try to obstruct the road ahead of you, and we have a very severe. There's no way to turn around for a vehicle to turn around down that road, so you'd end up driving down and then be stuck there essentially. It would be, you know, hard for visitors, delivery trucks, emergency vehicles. There are all sorts of reasons why we have concerns, but the point isn't whether they're good or bad. The point is we were told, yes, no problem. We understand. We'll remove them, but they didn't remove them. And you know, we just found out afterward, like, oh, we're going to try to turn this road into a private road. Similarly, there have been a few characterizations here that I think have been a little misleading. One is in communications with the board about the community engagement. That we had a meeting and no one showed up. We had this other meeting and we had a neighbor that supported the project. The reason no one showed up to this first meeting was that we all wanted to, there were a few times that they offered meetings and we chose a time and we all met with them at that time. So it's a little odd to say we were very disappointed no one showed up at other times that they knew we weren't coming to. And then the meeting with the architect was held after we'd already been told that our input wasn't going to be taken into account and this meeting wouldn't be postponed. And so why would we go to a meeting to hear about a project we already know about that our input isn't being taken into consideration for? And then that meeting was then sent to, and we met with our neighbor, the owner of 25 Still Creek. The owner of 25 Still Creek is Margaret New. She's not a neighbor. There's no home there. She lives in Washington, D.C., I believe. And you know, her last name is New because she was the wife of Bill New in the same way that Kristen was the daughter of Bill New. It was a family meeting with no outside people. It's not support from a neighbor. You know, similarly, you've heard here, you know, we own the road there. Well, they own that little portion of the road and other parts of the road are owned by the other neighbors. It's a road that is collectively owned by a large number of us. I believe that you heard representations about the square footages of houses where the footprint of one home is being compared to the total living space of the other homes. All of the homes on Still Creek Road are set back with the one exception of 35, which is well screened by trees, so it's not really visible. They're all set back like 500 feet, and they're all in living space on the order of two, I think the smallest one is 2,000 and the largest one is 3,800 square feet. Probably divide that by two to get the footprint of it. We're talking here about something that's, I don't know, 15, 20,000 square feet of living space when you add it up. I mean, it's not remotely comparable to character. And I think it's very misleading that there are all these communications happening as if this were similar somehow. Similarly, in terms of visibility from the road, you're hearing, oh, but the 95 Skywood or this house on Sunrise or whatever are visible. Yes, absolutely. You look at that intersection with Skywood and Sunrise, and the houses that are there on Skywood and Sunrise are visible from Still Creek Road, but the homes on Still Creek Road are not. And it is a very rural character. I believe you did get a video. I think you mentioned that you hadn't had an opportunity to see it.
We saw yours.
Okay, got it, okay. You know, it's woods there. And we're talking now about a set of variances that would have a house, or actually a compound of homes that is many times bigger than the current home, the largest home there. I think our home is the largest home there. It's 3,800 square feet of living space in total. And sorry, what?
Story?
2 stories, yes. Yeah, exactly. So footprint is significantly smaller than that. And we're talking about, you know, having it all jammed right up against the road. In fact, I think the carport, which wasn't really shown in the diagrams, and when you were hearing, oh, and the parking garage is screened by trees, there's an eyesore of a carport that's jammed right up against the road. And a multi-car carport. I don't think it was on the architect's plans when I was showing it. It was kind of dark in that area there. And I think it's actually technically in the roadway, or at least in the easement for the roadway. And you know, when we're talking about things like height variances and setback variances and so on, we're talking about, you know, creating something that would really change the character of the road. And as I said, I fully support anyone's right to build homes. No one is objecting to that here. But we all really love Still Creek Road. We moved to Still Creek Road because it's a beautiful rural setting, and it feels like you're just going through the woods in the redwood forest. It's just a wonderful place to live, and a huge compound that's jammed all up against the road would really change the nature of the, you know, just the feeling of the place as you're driving down it. And you know, there's also, I think, a sense, and you know, it makes us all a little bit uncomfortable, honestly, coming up and having this conversation with you, because Mr. Middleman joined the board while he had a matter under consideration here, and now is asking for a huge slew of variances and exceptions and so on of the very board that he's a member of. And I guess I would just ask you to, you know, take very seriously the way that looks, especially when you have every single neighbor in opposition to the plan. Not in opposition to homes being built, not in opposition to the concept of ADUs being built, not just in opposition to this particular plan. And I think that the point that, like, well, we would need the variances in order to construct something, then maybe construct something different that doesn't require the character of the neighborhood to change in the way that this would. And again, I wish I was here saying this is lovely. I'm not objecting to having the Middleman News as neighbors. I'm just saying, you know, I would like for the community engagement to be something where we can all, you know, have a chance to have our input taken into account, and to have a set of plans that the neighborhood can support. Unfortunately, that's not where we are right now. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online with a hand raised? I'm just going to go to online and see.
Yes, we just had a hand raised.
Let's go to online and then we'll come back to in the room. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Joan Main and I live at 7 Still Creek with my husband and our dog at this point. And I am in full agreement with what Aaron was saying. What I would ask the board to consider is this. The applicants are not naive applicants. They have, in fact, a project that was brought before the board in 2020 and 2021. And I supported that project. I came to the ASRB meeting and I supported that project at that point in time. Part of the reason that both my husband and I supported it at that point is that the applicants had reached out to us. In fact, we had them come to our home for dinner, not for dinner, excuse me, for wine and hors d'oeuvres, to bring their plans and show them to us and talk it through to us. I walk our dog along Still Creek and up on Sunrise every day, twice a day. Kristen walks her dogs, and John Middleman has walked his dog on Still Creek, and they both have spent time walking with me and Maggie, including recently, all the time. So imagine the shock and surprise when in all the times we've walked together, there was no discussion of changes in the plans or anything, or asking, will you support us? Will you continue to support us? So there was no communication until we heard from Sarah Filippi in planning, receiving the notice. That's it. So in fact, we're having trouble with characterization of outreach to neighbors when there was plenty of opportunity, certainly for outreach to me, and that was ignored. Secondly, I want to remind this board that what we're talking about is conceptual review, and I understand that completely, but the concepts are of modular homes being put on a street where everyone is set back, and the two examples given that the new homes that they want to build are trying to emulate are 95 Skywood and 35 Still Creek, both of which have architectural merit. These are flat roof, modular homes that do not fit in the character of even those homes that are somewhat visible from the street. My third point that I'd like the board to consider is that some of the things that have been said to you are misleading at best. That's as far as I'm going to go with that. But for example, this concept that reducing the fire load by cutting trees. Well, yes, that should be theoretically possible, but not when you don't clean up the slash. Redwood trees that are living are not, they're fire resistant. They're incredible carbon neutralizers when they're living and standing. When they're cut and the slash is left all over, you haven't reduced the fire load for the neighbors, nor have you done anything but destroy carbon storage. We don't have first growth redwoods on our sites. We have second growth redwoods on their sites. They're hundreds of feet, many of them, and hundreds of years old. Kristen had an arborist come and look at one of the trees, not one that was cut, and the arborist suggested it was between 600 and 800 years old. So if you haven't had a chance to come to Still Creek, it's a really special place. Second growth redwoods store about 339 metric tons of carbon per acre. So, I'm just stunned by some of the assertions that are made for you, like we will neutralize or reduce, we will reduce the fire load for our neighbors, we'll reduce the carbon footprint of the building, but the buildings are going to be trucked in from somewhere, so the carbon footprints of the buildings will be considerable. I don't disagree with building them. Remember, I supported the first plan. I'm simply asking you to consider that the concepts presented in the second plan are not the same as the first, not just the 2 extra ADUs, but whatever additional size and scope has been added on the, I guess they call it the south side of the street now, what I would call the west side of the street, but it doesn't matter. Where the main house is, the size and the scope is larger. The size of the tower to connect the ADU over the garage to the bridge to go to the main house is changed. The retaining wall on the side with 95 Skywood has been changed, et cetera. So we're just asking that you reject the concept and have the applicants reconsider how to incorporate, how to gain neighbor support. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back into the room. I think someone wanted to speak.
So my name is Bruce Bastel, and my wife Patricia and I live at 95 Skywood, which is right at the corner of Still Creek, Skywood, and Sunrise Drive. Or live at 105 Sunrise. So I think, you know, we're excited about having the news back in the neighborhood, and you know, certainly support them, but looking for something a little more modest in scope and scale. When I saw that David was part of the ASRB, I have to say that I was a little concerned, because we've actually seen this movie before. So I'm requesting that you reject the proposed non-conforming plans of the development at number 10 Still Creek as currently presented, and resist the temptation, give special treatment to a colleague. As background, we purchased our home 105 on the northeast corner of Skywood, Sunrise, Still Creek intersection in 1976. The sellers were Bill and Maggie New, who, along with Steve and Shirley Fisher and Rolf and Barbara Seitley, were partners in the Still Creek subdivision, previously called Shirley Lane, by the way. Steve Fisher was the lead surveyor for San Mateo County, and this was county property at the time. He was able to get the subdivision approved despite the 1972 GeoLabs geologic survey conclusion that the project area is characterized by two prominent features: the Pillar-Cetus Fault and extreme landsliding. Before the Still Creek subdivision and the Skywood subdivision was annexed into the town of Woodside in 1975, homes were approved and constructed on number 3, number 7, Still Creek, and 95 Skywood. So Steve Fisher's was number 3 Still Creek at that time. Subsequent to the town of Woodside annexation, Barbara Seitley, who is on the ASRB, the Planning Commission, Planning Council, and also on the Town Council and Mayor, was able to get her home at 35 Still Creek approved with variances. Additionally, Bill New was unable to get approval for the addition of 2 additional structures on his 95 Skywood property due to the soil's instability and the proximity of the Pillar-Cetus Fault to the building site. His project was subsequently approved after Bill New engaged Barbara Seitley to manage the approval process. It's against this history that this longtime Woodside resident says to you, "I do not expect you to be as pure as Caesar's wife," as the saying goes, when you submit your project plans or evaluate the plans of your neighbors. However, it appears that the proposed plan of your colleague goes out of its way to flaunt the town's municipal code rules and restrictions, including a huge main structure and an ADU duplex across the road, hugging the curb on both sides. Patricia and I totally support the attached group letter explaining our collective opposition to number 10 Still Creek project as currently proposed. We would also like to acknowledge the time and effort that you all devote to make the town of Woodside operate so smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you. I've had a request for a brief bio break, so let's take, see if we can keep it to like 4 minutes. 3. Sorry. Yes. All right, we're going to resume.
Oh, my feet are.
So we're still opening the public hearing. If anyone wishes to make a comment.
Excuse me, we're gonna get back in. Thanks.
So we're still in the period of open public comment. So if anyone else in the room or online wishes to make a comment, now's your opportunity to do so.
There are no raised hands online.
Raise hand online. Okay. The only thing we'd ask at this hour is that try and keep your comments concise.
So, my name's Simon Klemperer.
Could you step to the microphone, please?
My
Yeah.
name's Simon Klemperer. I live at number 3 Still Creek, which is the house we just heard about, one of the ones built by Steve
Just
Fisher.
could you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Okay. I've been in the neighborhood for 24 years now. And I want to preface my comments by saying I feel I've known Kristen that long. And I'm even more pleased to see Patty in the back, as she was perhaps the first person to welcome me into the neighborhood when she was still living there. And it's a delight to see her. And so you've heard how Kristen has been a worker within the community on our HOA and things like that. And after the first snafus of communication, she has shared plans with us. And I reviewed the hour-long video of her meeting with the architect that she kindly circulated to us. I love the idea of the family values, the multi-generational living sense. And my personal politics means that I believe we have a moral duty to build ADUs in this town, even though it's not always what we want. So with that preface, what's not to like about this project? And I trust that Jim the architect is still online. It's a remarkable, it's a creative design. I love the architecture, and then the issue is, does it fit in this place? So I did write a letter to you, and I addressed some of the issues. I want to say, I think everything that David has said is almost certainly true. This is a concept review board, and I hope that you will consider not just the legality of each word, but also whether it fits with the intent of the code, the intent of the town plan. So I hate to use David's words against him, but the email that he sent you on Thursday, the carport helps obscure the structure from the road. Well, the carport is perhaps the most visible excrescence of this design, and it builds out over the deeded area of the road. I do not believe that the planning department even has authority to permit that structure. I'm a layman. I don't know. Julie and Sarah and Sage will tell me if I'm wrong, and I've been wrong many times talking to them, but I just don't understand that. Today, David read from the long description of the ways in which they have met the requirements. And they describe the way the spacing between the garage and ADU number 2 is greater than that the fire department requires. And yet at the same time, these are attached structures. So the issue is trying to have the cake and eat it, to play both sides of the fence. It's a hugely creative design, but it seeks to take too much advantage of the code. David correctly said, it is built within half a mile of a public transport corridor. I haven't had time to check whether the word corridor is the one used in the code, but it is more than half a mile from the nearest active bus stop. And that nearest active bus stop is served by a single school bus at 7:15 in the morning. that does not return back up the hill with any passengers. They cancelled the going home service from the schools. I wrote to oppose it, they cancelled it. So yes, it may fit the legality of being within half a mile, but it does not meet the intent. It does not meet what anyone, any citizen of the town of Woodside would believe is what is meant, intended by the authors of the code. We've heard how the comparisons are always to 105 Sunrise, to 95 Skywood. Yes, those houses have, those properties have frontage on Still Creek, but those houses are not on the private part of Still Creek Road that starts below those houses. Those really aren't the appropriate comparisons to use. I don't know the legality, the remit of this board. I don't know whether you have the right to give concept review to a plan that we know violates the town code. We know the JADU, as currently shown, is too large. We know, and it cannot be permitted as far as I understand, with any exceptional variance. We know that ADUs 3 and 4 have more than a cumulative 800 square feet outside the setback. And it's my belief that the Planning Commission cannot permit that. David he submitted the revised proposal for ADUs, including ADUs 3 and 4, before the town approved the code to accept those new ADUs. That's fine. He knew it was coming down the pipeline. He read the code. He got that bit right. But presumably, David also knows that the code now allows these ADUs as of right to extend into the area that has more than 35% slope. And if I've read that code right, that means that these ADUs, ADU 2 as well, can be moved into different positions. It is no longer removing the right, as David said. He has the ability to change this plan now, given this new code. Somebody said, David is not a naive applicant. And you know, that's what I feel about this, that the plans can be changed so as not to require some of these variances. That, I think, is what the neighbors are asking. The plans, because the plans were drawn up, the original survey was done before the 35% exception was in the code, or perhaps even mooted for the code. The survey does not show those areas of the lot, does not show all those areas of the lot that are between 35% and 50%. And so I think there is a significantly more opportunity to revise these plans in an equally creative way. The architect can do even more now, right? He's got more open scope. We've heard David say 95 Skywood was given a variance for a 70% slope. Well, I think the architect is so creative, and Kristen and David are so creative, I would love to see them given a variance to cut into a 70% slope and make this house, give them the house of their dreams, give them the compound, but one that does not intrude in this way on the main road. Thank you all. And if it was only the main residence, I wouldn't be here tonight. I would be thrilled that you guys would be moving back in. And you will move back in, right? Because somehow we're all going to make it happen.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take, I think, one more public comment. If anyone has a comment they wish to make. Nope.
Still no raised hands online.
No hands online. All right, with that, I will close the public comment and we'll move to board discussion. I'll kick this one off. I don't usually, but I will. It's a challenge. Well, it's easy to summarize. It's a challenging site. It's a solution that shows respect for the environment, a very light touch on the environment with regard, in particular regard to grading. I don't think anyone on the board had a comment with regard to materials selection. So in terms of suitability materials, I think probably find the board unanimous in support of that. My sense is that so much of the focus is on the ADUs. And if we were just reviewing, actually, I'll echo your comment. If we were reviewing a main structure alone in isolation, I don't think there would be much resistance. I think the ADUs are cause for friction and are generating majority of concern expressed by the neighbors. I've served on this board 2.5 years, and I have to confess, this is the most desk items I think we've ever received, with one exception of Robert's parking. that might take the cake, but this project by far has generated the most outreach in terms of expressing concern about suitability of the project. And particularly, I think when I say suitability, I'm meaning that to say the impact of the ADUs specifically on the road itself. So, I mean, with that, I'm happy to invite other members of the board to express opinion. I think as it pertains to variances, I'll wrap up my comments with regards to, again, I think as expressed in the first ASRB review, and I think was later discussed with planning, which was that the height variance was manageable in terms of granting that. I think the setback, for me personally, I think the setback variance would be a difficult variance to achieve. I'd be hard pressed to understand how planning would look at the carport on the main structure and the carport for the ADU and be wholly in support of granting that variance. Yeah, I think other members of the board, invite your perspective.
It's a beautiful concept in terms of multi-generational living. I'm even envious a little bit because my children and our grandchildren, I mean, they may or may not be as enthusiastic about it, but it's a beautiful concept. But all you said, I fully share your point of view.
Some of the challenges we're hearing from the neighbors as well is the mass of the ADU over the garage or in the garage area there really stands out. And then when you couple that with looking back at the height of the house, it just feels it feels pretty steep or pretty tall. I agree with the concept of the carport being on the road, that I understand that you're trying to shield the ADUs, but then putting the cars there, what somebody want to look at more, cars or ADUs, and where else could you put the cars? I know it's mandatory that you obviously have them. And then one other thought, I suppose, is these roads are so delicate that the construction really is going to wreak havoc on it. Is that something that you might consider in engaging with your neighbors on how there might be a contribution to repair potentially that would make them feel like you are supporting them? And there certainly is a value to, you all have to look at each other driving down the road. If you could come together to compromise, that would be amazing. And I don't know if that's something that you feel at this point you'd like to consider in order to have good feelings, or do you feel at this point, you know, that you just want to continue pushing down the path that you're going? I think that's what happened.
All right, thank you.
You know, I actually really like the design of the house. I think the color scheme is amazing. The materials are wonderful. I look for hazards wherever I go. You know, I'm always looking at, oh my God, what if a tree falls on this bridge, and can you get the older people out of the house, or can you just get to somebody? And I feel like I'd like to hear more from the experts and have the fire department come in earlier rather than, later. And just give an assessment, like, is this going to work? What do we need? Does a road need to be better? How are we going to turn around the trucks? So that's really my main concern. I love the multi-generational family. I think that's wonderful and that you all get along. I mean, probably wouldn't happen in my household, but a- and I do know that we don't have much say over the ADUs. It's kind of a policy now that if they meet the criteria, we have to accept them because that's part of our housing plan to the state. But I'm not sure these are in compliance with the rules of the ADU. And again, I think we need an expert, the planning commission, to tell us, are these okay? Because if they were in the back of the house, 5 feet from the fence, 800 square feet, we couldn't say anything. It would be, not up to us to say anything. So I feel like it's a beautiful design. I think your architect is great. But I think we need more engineers, more planning people, more fire people to tell us, is this actually going to work? Are we going to have a mudslide? I mean, you talked about you were out there with the flooding on the streets when it was flooding. So these things, I mean, when I hear that, gosh. So that's what I would like to see, is just more of the experts tell us how feasible it is.
Yeah, I'll just see if I can summarize. Actually, I think the last neighbor's comments were in many ways reminded us that this is a conceptual review, and in many ways we are trying to evaluate the spirit of what the family is trying to achieve, independent of legally what can be done or through variances can be granted. But given the feedback from the surrounding neighbors, I'm prepared to make a motion to once again continue this project, solicit more outreach from the neighbors towards finding whatever changes are necessary to address concerns, such that the next review that we have in a much better state with regards to support for what you're trying to achieve. Was that formed as a sufficiently adequate motion?
Yes, so your motion was to continue the item to solicit more outreach from the neighbors to see if changes can be made to the project that could address some of their concerns or all of their concerns. We also heard that whereas conceptual design review projects are not routed to the fire district, it doesn't mean they can't be routed to the fire district.
Okay.
So if that's something the board would like the applicant to consider, we can work with the applicant to have that plan routed, or if they make modifications, have that modified plan routed to the fire district. And I think and then the other comment was kind of general, just that the ADUs and the carport. So you have ADU number 2, and then 3 and 4 across the street with the carport. Those are creating a lot of the concerns with visibility from the roadway. And if there's any modifications that could be made to those structures to minimize their visibility. As the one speaker noted, the code did change recently to allow more flexibility for ADUs within slopes next 35%. That's something that I'll need to look at closer. I think it may just be blanket, be able to be applied to any ADU. And so that's something, the applicant can consider if they're making any revisions. And with that, and then I'll just note that, the ASRB noted it's a very challenging site, commended the applicant for the main residence creating a light touch to the land that minimizes grading, and commended the applicant for a pseudo material selection There was no opposition to the design of the structure. And and those are the notes that I have. And
I think that covers it. Yep.
if there's anything else,
Just a couple of things. Well, first of all, just because it doesn't fit with no dollar, I mean,
yeah,
that's been tabled, right?
the applicant has noted that they've taken that off they will be taking that off the plan. I just, something that just, because we're a technical freak with the code. So something like this would be considered a gate. Gates on private roads require approval of a conditional use permit. And one of the requirements in the code is that all of the people who have access through that gate consent to the application. And so if the applicant were to consider something like that, they would really need to work with all the people who have access rights through that area.
Is there any, because, I mean, the big issue really is, will planning allow the setback variance on the guest house, the ADUs? Is there a way for them to meet with the planning that just, it seems like
It's a chicken or the egg kind of thing with this. And whenever we have these entitlements, it's always, can I get my entitlement approved before I get the design approved? And you really need to know the specifics of the design to determine if you can approve the entitlement. So, and then as well as the ASRB being a recommending body and the Planning Commission being the decision-making body. So they couldn't really make a decision and then come back for some other recommendation. So the proper steps are to gain a recommendation from the ASRB, however that may land, and then from there to proceed to the Planning Commission, and they would make a decision on the project. We haven't had a chance to look at findings too deeply. We always want to make sure from the staff level that we have a complete formal design review application before we commit to any type of recommendation that's made. We can have further conversations with the applicant to see how maybe they could minimize those exceptions. As I've noted, yes, it's a very large site, although it is a constrained site. And often in these hillside areas is where you would find, some setback exceptions. If there's ability to put something further back from the road, that could be ideal. It's something that we can work with the applicant on.
It would be great if all the neighbors put it behind them, that there were misrepresentations in your mind, but not in David's mind, so that you could move forward and work together.
Maybe to add to this, on the 14th of December 2020 and on the 21st of June 2021, there were objections and clarifications and answers from the applicant. Now there are more. Some of them may have a good point. Some of them may be a miscommunication. For example, I noticed a question about modular housing, which may not be applicable to this. These are wonderful materials, but doesn't mean that it's prefabricated housing. So it would be helpful to really summarize it across multiple sessions so that it will be clear which items were fully closed and which are still, or maybe still pending or questionable. And also mentioned about the fire department. In my personal experience, years back, the fact that eventually everything gets to the fire department or to a geological review may be very kind of bad surprise, might take additional time. It is, even though our internal workflow does not call for this, it is a very good advice I hear that a fire department you may benefit, everyone will benefit from that discussion, as well as geological review upfront as opposed to the end of the process.
Yes, yep, we can definitely do that. And if the applicant wants to, they can also initiate early geologic review. It'll definitely be something that will likely be started to review with the formal design review package. I just want to note, the modular housing, it's something that the town, cannot discriminate for nor against. It's something that's allowed by state law. I don't think this is technically considered a modular house, but I think the way I saw the comments, they were kind of looking at these kind of modules essentially. But in any event, the type of construction It needs to meet building code, fire codes, and that's what's most important.
And for a fire-prone area, this is really a wonderful solution. I'm very much impressed.
So we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Is the motion?
Sure. So the motion was that to continue the item with direction to the applicant, to solicit more outreach to see what changes can be made to address the concerns. And for the applicant to look at ways that could possibly modify the locations of ADU 2, 3, and 4, reduce the visibility from the roadway, as well as to look at the carport to see if that can be removed or relocated. Definitely so it's not within any roadway easement, also trying to reduce the visibility.
Slight modification of that first sentence,
Sure.
which is not about the ADU visibility to the roadway, but encroachment.
Sure. And the last piece was to have the project routed to the fire district for their review and early comments at this time.
Good. Second.
Second the motion.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Vice Chair Comra,
What is this actually?
Correct. It's continuing the conceptual review with this direction to the applicant to return to the ASRB.
Member Taft,
Yes.
Yes.
oh, and Member Delgado, apologies.
The motion passes 4-0. Just so everyone's aware, in the next couple of days, we'll have this outlined in a letter, and we'll make sure everyone who's been involved in the process receives a copy of the letter.
Thank you. Okay, that closes the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any director's reports or anything?
No, nothing to add at this time. We're continuing to look at ADU regulations, and the next topic up is to look at will be for converting structures, including barn structures, and we're hoping to have that to the Planning Commission in February.
Okay, good. Thank you. With that, I'll close the meeting at 7 p.m.